July 7th, 1977, Hawley, Texas. A 15-year-old girl steps outside into the thick summer heat. The air smells wrong. Heavy, like sulfur, like rotten eggs. She doesn't know it yet, but she's about to see something she will never ever forget. 7 feet tall, hair from the crown of its head all the way down its back. It doesn't turn around. It doesn't need to. She runs. Welcome to Bizarre Ones. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bizarre Ones. I'm your host, I'm in Ash. And today, today we're going somewhere wild. Literally, we are talking about creatures that have been spotted over from the backwoods of West Texas all the way to the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas. Bigfoot, the Yeti, and the little one, other one hits a little close to home. The beast known as the Hawley. Now, before we get into it, I have to say something. This episode is a little bittersweet for me, and if you've been following our page for a while, then you know that this is, podcast is Kai, Tonya, and me. This is my last episode as your host. I'm moving to Ontario, Canada to be with my girlfriend, and honestly, I couldn't be happy about that part. But leaving the show, leaving y'all, that part is not easy. Not at all. But we're not doing the sad stuff yet. We're going out with a bang. I've got two of my absolute favorite people with me today, and we are going deep into one of the most fascinating rabbit holes I've ever gone down. So let me bring them in first. First, she is sharp, she is passionate, and she will absolutely fight you if you disrespect cryptid research. Tonya Kitsune.
Ha! I will fight someone. That is not a lie. Hey everybody, so excited to be here for this one. Ash, you know the topic has been on my list forever, so I'm glad we're finally doing it.
Same, and rounding out our panel, he thinks that we're both completely delusional, but hey, he's here anyway, Kyla Cross.
I don't think you're delusional. I think you're enthusiastic about things that may or may not exist. But hey, everyone.
Kai, that's worse than delusional. That's like worse.
I stand by it.
Okay. This is already the perfect energy. Alright, before we get into our first creature, let's set the stage, Tonya. Why does this stuff matter? Why have humans literally across every culture on Earth reported giant, hairy, bipedal creatures for thousands of years?
Right. And this is the part I always find most compelling, even from a purely anthropological standpoint. You have indigenous cultures in the Pacific Northwest with Sasquatch legends going back centuries. You have the Sherpa people of Nepal with the Yeti, which they call Matahi, meaning man-bear. You have Aboriginal Australians with the Yowie. You have the Almas in the Central Asia. And when you zoom out, you realize these are not copycat legends. These are cultures that had zero contact with each other, describing almost the exact same creature. That should give everyone pause, regardless of where they stand on the belief spectrum.
Okay, hear me out. It reflects something universal about the human brain. We've evolved in environments where our predators were real and deadly. Our minds are literally wired to detect large, upright threats moving through the trees. Pareidolia, for monsters, essentially. These legends could reflect a shared psychological phenomenon rather than a shared creature.
That is actually a genuinely interesting point, Kai.
I have them occasionally.
But here's what I'd push back on. The physical evidence, the footprints, the casts, the hair samples. You can't explain away a 16-inch footprint cast from undisturbed ground with our brains are wired for fear.
You can absolutely explain some of them with deliberate hoaxing, which we know for a fact has occurred. Ray Wallace, the guy behind some of the most famous Bigfoot tracks in history, had his family come forward after his death and reveal he had been faking prints for decades using carved wooden feet.
He did. He really did, but not every track can be attributed to Ray Wallace, not by a long shot. All right, let's get into it. We'll start with Bigfoot, move to the Yeti, and bring it all home right here to Texas with the Hawley. Tonya, you're up.
Okay, so Bigfoot, so officially or semi-officially in the cryptid world, Bigfoot, also called Sasquatch, is described as a large bipedal, ape-like creature, typically 7 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark brown or reddish hair with enormous feet, often 14 to 20 inches in length, primarily associated with the Pacific Northwest, but sightings have been reported in nearly every U.S. state at this point.
Which blows my mind every single time. People in Florida, Ohio, Texas. It's not just a Pacific Northwest thing.
Which is actually somewhat suspicious to me. A real animal tends to have a defined habitat range. When something is reported literally everywhere, that starts to look less like a species distribution map and more like a cultural meme spreading.
Or it's a highly adaptable species with a massive range, which isn't unprecedented. Black bears are found in almost every U.S. state, and coyotes have expanded from the west to basically the entire continent in under a century.
Coyotes aren't 8 foot tall and bipedal.
No, but the point stands on range. Anyway, the modern Bigfoot legend really enters mainstream consciousness in 1958 when a Northern California newspaper called the Humboldt Times ran an article about a bulldozer operator named Jerry Crew who found massive humanoid footprints around the worksite near Bluff Creek. That article coined the term Bigfoot. The story went national and opened the floodgates.
And we later found out that Ray Wallace, a contractor working in that same area, had almost certainly made those specific tracks. His family confirmed it after his death in 2002.
Some of those tracks, Kai, not all. Workers at the site reported things that couldn't be explained by wooden feet, sounds, smells, structures.
And then 9 years later, you get the most famous piece of Bigfoot evidence ever captured, the Patterson-Gimlin film. 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin are riding horses through Bluff Creek when they capture about a minute footage, what appears to be a large, upright, hair-covered creature walking alongside a creek and turning to look different directly at the camera. That film has been analyzed by scientists, film experts, and Hollywood costume designers for nearly 60 years, and nobody has definitive proof that that particular footage was a hoax.
Yeah, but nobody has definitive proof that it's real either. Patterson himself was a known Bigfoot enthusiast who was specifically searching for the creature on that trip. The conflict of interest is purely significant, if you ask me.
Sure, but the biochemical analysis is difficult to dismiss. Researchers who have studied the creature's gait, the muscle movement, the way the glutes and hamstrings flex mid-stride have concluded it would be extraordinarily difficult, possibly impossible, for a human in a costume to replicate that movement convincingly on film in 1967. The technology simply didn't exist.
Bob Haramis came forward in 2004 saying he was the man in the suit.
He did. But his story had some consistency problems, and costume designers who tried to recreate the suit based on his description couldn't match what's going on in the film. So make of that what you will.
It's not just the Patterson film. Thousands of reported sightings across centuries, physical evidence, cast, hair samples, tree structures that some researchers believe are territorial markers or nesting structures, thermal footage showing large bipedal heat signatures in the forested areas.
Let's talk about one of the most popular scientific theories for what Bigfoot might be, the Gigantopithecus hypothesis.
Yes. So that was that particular thing was a massive ape, potentially the largest primate that ever lived, that we know existed in Asia until about 300,000 years ago based on fossil evidence. Some researchers have proposed that a small population survived, crossed into North America via the Bering Land Bridge during the last ice age, and the Bigfoot could have been a living descendant, if you will.
That hypothesis has several problems. The Gigantopithecus, whatever the thing's called, fossil evidence suggests it was likely a quadruped, not bipedal. 300,000 years is an enormous gap with zero confirmed fossil records in the Americas. And if a population survived and thrived across North America, we should have found bones scats, dens, nesting sites, something, but we found nothing at all.
Large great apes in forested environments may not leave much fossil evidence. It could decompose quickly in acidic forest soil, and the biological material argument cuts both ways. We found material at encounter sites that doesn't match known species, you know?
And honestly, we're still discovering new species. A new species of beaked whale was confirmed just a few years ago. The idea that something large and elusive could still be out there isn't as wild as it sounds, Kai.
I get that, but oceans cover like 70% of the Earth and are largely uncharted. Fair point. But land masses in North America extensively surveyed, logged, hunted, hiked, a population of 8 to 10 foot bipedal primates living undetected on land is a fundamentally different proposition.
Okay, let's travel. Pacific Northwest to the roof of the world. Time to talk about the Yeti.
The Yeti, sometimes called the abominable snowman, though the Sherpa find that name a bit reductive, is one of the oldest and most deeply embedded cryptid legend in the world. Sherpa, Tibetan, and Nepali peoples have referred to this creature for centuries. The Sherpa call it the Yeti, or Maitai, man-bear, or literally that thing. Tibetan Buddhists have long held the Yeti to be real, and it appears in religious texts and iconography going back a long time.
And unlike Bigfoot, typically described with dark brown fur, the Yeti is most often described as white or grayish, which makes sense for the environment, high altitude, snowfields, and Himalayas. It's theoretically adapted to an entirely different world.
Which is interesting from a biological thought experiment standpoint. The Himalayas are one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Oxygen levels at serious altitude are punishing even for humans with years of acclimatization. The idea of a large primate thriving up there faces some real psychological challenges.
Okay, although in this matters, the Yeti is not exclusively reported at extreme altitudes. A lot of traditional accounts and sightings place it in forested valleys below the snow line. It moves between environments. The abominable snowman framing kind of stuck because Western explorers first encountered evidence of it at high altitude. So that it's not always at the high altitudes. That's just where they first encountered it, if you understand, what I'm saying.
Let's talk about how the Yeti entered Western consciousness. Early 1950s. The world is preparing for the first Everest summit, and Eric Shipton, a legendary British mountaineer, photographs a series of large, clear footprints in the snow at around 19,000 feet during a 1951 reconnaissance expedition. 13-inch prints, 5 toes, in a shape that doesn't match any known animal. These photos run in newspapers worldwide and made the Yeti a global phenomenon.
And multiple researchers have proposed these prints could have been made by a Himalayan brown bear or a Tibetan blue bear. When a bear steps in its own front print with its rear foot, it creates a large, irregular, somewhat humanoid impression. And melting and refreezing of snow, and the print distorts further.
I mean, I get that, Kai. That explains some prints, right? But Shipton was an extraordinary, experienced mountaineer who spent decades in those mountains. He examined those prints up close with his team. He's not confusing a bear track for a 13-inch humanoid print.
Edmund Hillary himself, first person to summit Everest, brought back a scalp from the Kamajang Monastery on a 1960 investigation expedition. That scalp is still there today.
Which was tested and found to be constructed from the hide of a sero, a Himalayan goat antelope. So the monks had a ritualistic object made from a known animal, which illustrates how legends can generate compelling seeming physical artifacts with mundane explanations.
Okay, you got me there, true. But one explained artifact does not account for centuries of eyewitnesses' accounts from people who live in those mountains and know the local fauna better than any visiting scientist ever could, like me or you. we don't live there, so like you think they would know about their area more than we would.
In 2017, there was a significant genetic study. A team analyzed hair samples from across the Himalayas that had been attributed to the Yeti. And so what did they find?
Okay, yes. So most samples match known animals, bears primarily. But here's where it gets interesting. Some samples matched an ancient bear lineage that diverged from polar bears hundreds of thousands of years ago, which may suggest there may be a bear in those mountains we don't fully understand yet. Not a Yeti, but something unexpected, and that is significant.
What is science working correctly? Unknown biological material was found, tested, and produced. Surprising result that is now being investigated. That's different from concluding it must be a mythical ape-man. But I'll grant you, it's generally interesting.
And what do you do with the eyewitness accounts that specifically describe something bipedal, walking upright, sustained over distance? Bears can rear up, sure, but they don't walk bipedally as a primary mode of travel.
Bears actually do walk upright when startled or reaching for food. And at altitude and low visibility, fog, exhaustion, altitude, hypoxia, affecting cognitive function, a marine bear could reasonably be misread as a large bipedal creature by even experienced observers like the ones you've mentioned,
I want to make a point that I think gets lost in the Western approach to the Yeti. For the Sherpa and the Tibetan people, this creature isn't a cryptid puzzle to be solved. It's a living part of their spiritual and cultural world. There are Sherpa guides who have led hundreds of Everest expeditions, people with extraordinary observation skills and a lifetime in those mountains, who would tell you quietly and seriously that they've encountered something up there that they cannot explain. That witness carries a different kind of weight.
Absolutely. And I always appreciate when Western researchers are willing to acknowledge that Western scientific frameworks are not the only valid lens for understanding reality.
I have genuine respect for these accounts. I'm not dismissing them as lies. I'm saying human perception is fallible under extreme physical stress, sleep deprivation, altitude, hypoxia, sustained fear, all conditions present on the Himalayan expeditions.
You know what? For a skeptic, you are genuinely thoughtful about how you approach this. You're not saying you're not just saying it's all garbage or anything like.
I'm not a dismisser, right? That's not what I'm going for here. I'm playing, I think it could be possible, because, I'm the one that started this Bizarre Ones podcast. So, I do believe in bizarre and paranormal and strange phenomenon. I'm just a skeptic when it comes to Bigfoot. There's a difference. I'm not a dismisser. I'm a skeptic.
We know. We still think you're wrong, but we know.
Okay, so we've been from the Pacific Northwest to Nepal. Now it's time to come home. For the listeners that don't know, me, Tonya, Kitsune, and Kai live in Texas. So it's time to talk about the one that started the whole episode for me, the Hawley hymn.
Here we go.
Tell me everything, or tell us everything, I guess is what I was looking for. Sorry.
Okay. For anybody who has never for anybody who's sorry. Okay, so for anybody who has never heard of the Hawley hymn, let me paint the picture. Hawley, Texas. Small town in Jones County. West Texas, not far from Abilene. It's flat, it's dry, it's remote, and just outside of town, there's an area called the Shinery. Dense, brushy, difficult terrain, thick underbrush, tree cover, generally hard to move through.
And West Texas having a Bigfoot-type creature actually makes more geographical sense than people assume, because the Clear Fork of the Brazos River runs through that area. River corridors in Texas have a long history of cryptid reports. Dense riparian vegetation, constant water source, animal migration corridors. It's exactly the environment a large reclusive animal would be drawn to.
July 7th, 1977, two teenage boys, Tom Roberts and Larry Shuggs, are out near the Abilene Boys Ridge, clearing brush for an electric fence. Hot morning, they start getting hit with rocks. Small ones at first, like something is throwing from the tree line. They look around, can't see anything through the dense brush. Then the rocks come back, harder, more deliberate.
And then they have an encounter, something in the brush that terrifies them completely. They run to a nearby home. A 15-year-old girl named Renee Miller is there, and at some point she has her own encounter. She sees the back of the creature, roughly 7 feet tall, covered in long hair from the top of the head down its back.
Here is the detail I keep coming back to. The smell. Before she even sees it, she smells it. Rotten eggs. Sulfuric. The specific odor is reported in Bigfoot encounters across North America. It is not a detail a teenage girl in Hawley, Texas in 1977 would know to add if she was making something up. She didn't have the internet. She didn't have access to Pacific Northwest Bigfoot case files. She just described what she smelled.
Or it's a detail that accumulated over decades of retelling as the local legend absorbed the broader Bigfoot narrative. By the time the story is being recounted in modern interviews, it has been filtered through decades of cultural context.
Renee Miller has told this story consistently the same since 1977. The court details have not shifted. She is on record in multiple interviews over many years, and she says to this day the fear has never left her. That is not the behavior pattern of someone embellishing for attention or embellishing the narrative or something like that, you know?
Here's where it gets interesting for the next part of the story. So then the town of Hawley goes absolutely wild. It gets in the papers, which for a small town like Hawley, that's like something that doesn't happen, right? Monster hunters start showing up from all over the country. A Texas oilman named Jack Grimm puts up a $5,000 bounty for the live capture of the Hawley Him. Live capture only, and it had to be a previously undiscovered species. He's not paying out for a bear or a man in a suit.
Jack Grimm is actually a fascinating figure in the story. He was a wealthy eccentric who simultaneously had bounties out for the Hawley Him, the Loch Ness Monster, and a Texas Thunderbird type creature. He also funded expeditions to find the Titanic and Noah's Ark. He was a man who deeply wanted monsters to be real. Like, that was like his thing, his dream. He wanted to find these things, and he wasn't going to settle for any hoax.
Which you can read as gullible, or you can read as someone wealthy enough to actually pursue these questions rather than just wonder about them.
The bounty brought in so many hunters and spectators that Renee Miller's family had to post a no trespassing sign. People showing up at 10 to 11 at night. For a town as small as Hawley, that is an enormous disruption.
Which also seriously muddies the evidentiary waters. You've got hundreds of people trampling the shinery, potentially creating false tracks, an immediate atmosphere that incentivizes reporting encounters. How do you separate genuine evidence from noise in the environment? How do you separate this actual evidence from somebody just wanting to be in the paper or to be on K-Tab and K-Texas News? How do you do that?
And so, Kai, you bring up something interesting because you often can't. But researchers did cast what appeared to be large inhuman footprints from the area before the hordes of people arrived. And then reports started coming in that the creature had moved, allegedly tracking southwest over about 4 months, roughly 20 miles to the town of Merkel, Texas, where new sightings began.
Which is actually consistent with behavior you would expect from a large, intelligent animal that had been spooked out of its territory by a sudden influx of humans with guns. And who knows what else. Moving away would be like the smart response, right?
Or the Merkel sightings were inspired by the media coverage and people primed to see something unusual. Copycat reports are extremely common in cryptid cases. Once a region is associated with a sighting, reports tend to multiply, because people want to be part of it. They want to be part of this phenomenon. They want to be part of the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying that the Hawley Him, the Bigfoot, or the Yeti, or any of these things aren't real. I'm just trying to look at it from a logical perspective. And when it comes to this particular paranormal phenomenon or strange phenomenon, I'm just very skeptical. I'm sorry.
This part of the story, I love this part of the story. The Hawley Him became part of the community fabric in the best way. The First Baptist Church of Hawley put a cooking a coloring page. Sorry, coloring page of the Creature on Their Vacation Bible School invitations that summer. A record number of kids showed up, over 100.
That is deeply, perfectly Texas.
That is gently charming. I'll give you that one completely.
And the thing is, this is not an isolated event in that part of Texas. There's a creature called the Haskell Rascal, or the Haskell Thing, reported in Haskell County in the 1960s. Same general descriptions in the Cattle Critter, reported in 1964, Jones County, Stevens County. That whole stretch of West Texas has documented history of these encounters going back at least 60 years before 1977. The Hawley hymn didn't come out of nowhere.
And that regional pattern over multiple decades is one of the stronger arguments. It's not one scared teenager one time. It's a specific geographic area with a persistent multi-generation track record of encounters.
Or a regional legend that perpetuates itself because the story is compelling and the culture keeps it alive. Once an area is known for monster sightings or cryptid sightings, people who encounter anything unusual in the dark are primed to interpret it through that lens.
Okay, so I want to share something kind of personal for a second, if that's okay. When I first moved to this area, I'm not from Texas originally, just like, Kai isn't, or you aren't, Tonya, right? And people told me about the Hawley hymn almost immediately. Like, it was one of the first local stories I heard. And I remember thinking, oh, it's just a small town legend. Every place has one. And the more I dug into it, the more I talked to people who lived there their whole lives. That's a different quality how they talk about it. It's not like telling a campfire story to scare kids. It's quieter, more reluctant, like they know how it sounds. And they're telling it anyways because they cannot, not tell it. That stuck with me.
Oh, definitely. That quality, that reluctant seriousness is something I've noticed consistently when talking to people who've had, a genuine unexplained experiences. They're almost apologetic about it. That is very different from someone performing a legend or just retelling a urban legend or story.
That quality can also come with from someone who's internalized a story so deeply over the years of retelling that it feels absolutely certain to them, even if the original experience was ambiguous. Memory is reconstructive. That's not an insult, it's just neuroscience.
Fair, but Kai, have you ever had an experience you couldn't explain? Not a monster thing, just anything, where your rational brain is reaching for an answer and coming up empty.
Yeah, I mean, I have, like, once or twice, and, some of them we've talked about on the podcast, so, I mean, we've talked about some on the podcast and others we haven't.
Oh, now we absolutely need to know.
We are not talking about that. Different podcast, different day.
Tonya, mark that down.
Already done.
Moving on.
So, we've covered a lot of ground, right? Okay, so we've gone through each creature individually. And I want to zoom out because the point of this episode isn't just to survey 3 creatures. It's to look at what they've shared, what these reports, separated by thousands of miles in completely different cultures, have in common. Tonya, walk us through it.
The connections I find most compelling operate on a few different levels. First, the physical description. Across, Bigfoot, the Yeti, the Hawley hymn, and dozens of similar creatures reported worldwide, you have remarkable consistency. Large bipedal body, 7 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark or reddish hair, or occasionally white at altitude. A humanoid face that is somehow more ape-like, large feet, enormous upper body strength. That is a very specific profile, and it shows across cultures with no contact with each other.
Or it reflects what the human brain naturally generates when imagining a large bipedal threat. The descriptions you just gave is essentially human, but bigger and hairier. It could be my freaking grandfather. Sorry. That is the most intuitive mental template for a threatening hominid. It doesn't require an actual creature.
Oh, so you got the second level. The second level is behavioral. All these three creatures are reported as predominantly reclusive, avoiding human contact unless cornered or provoked, near water sources, dense vegetation, remote terrain, rock throwing as a warning, or territorial behavior, which importantly is documented in known great apes, in that sulfuric smell showing up in reports from Washington State to Nepal to West Texas in 1977. This is a very specific sensory detail appearing across completely unconnected reports.
Keep coming back to that smell of everything. That is the detail I cannot explain away. Why does every culture's version of this creature, smell like rotten eggs?
Sulfuric odors occur naturally in many environments. Volcanic activity, bacterial processes, wetlands, decomposing organic matter. Someone in dense forest near boggy ground could easily encounter a sulfur smell from entirely natural sources and associate it with whatever frightened them.
This shinery in Hawley, Texas is not near any volcanic or marshy area, and many Pacific Northwest encounter sites aren't either. The smell appears in environments where it is not environmentally expected, so that is harder to wave away with what you were saying, Kai. Like, how do you explain that one?
And then there's the third connection, the one I find most fascinating, the way these creatures exist at the intersection of the physical and the spiritual and the cultures that have lived alongside them the longest. The Sherpa don't classify the Yeti as simply an animal. It carries spiritual significance to them, right? Indigenous Pacific Northwest people similarly describe Sasquatch in terms that go beyond taxonomy. Even in Hawley, a modern Texas community, the Hawley hymn has taken on a quality of something more than an identified animal. It becomes part of the identity of that place.
Okay, so furthermore, there was a researcher named John Bindernagel, I think his name was. He was a wildlife biologist who spent his career applying formal, rigorous biological methodology to Bigfoot research. His argument was that if you strip away the cultural noise and analyze only the reported behaviors and physical descriptions, you get a profile eternally consistent with a large, intelligent, primary nocturnal forest primate. He wasn't arguing from belief, he was arguing from method,
Yeah, Bender Nagel did serious work. I won't dismiss him. I can't dismiss him. My issue isn't with the methodology, right? It's with the beginning from the assumption that there is a real animal generating the reports before that premise has been established.
But isn't it, we haven't established it fundamentally, is that actually really fundamentally different from it doesn't exist? An absence of proof isn't proof of absence.
Completely correct. That is actually where I generally give you ground. The honest skeptical position is not these creatures definitely don't exist. It's we have sufficient evidence. We don't have sufficient evidence to confirm that they do. These are very different statements. And if compelling physical evidence emerged, a confirmed body, DNA from an unknown primate, I would update my position immediately and change it.
That's all serious researchers are asking for. Open inquiry. Don't close the door before you look.
Fair. That's fair.
Are we having a moment of real agreement on the bizarre ones right now? Somebody document this. This is historic.
Oh, I'm definitely writing this down. Right now, I'm writing it down, and I might bring it up in a future episode of the podcast.
Don't push it.
Okay, so theories. Because there's not just one answer on the table here. There are several competing explanations for what the Bigfoot, the Yeti, and the Hawley hymn might be, assuming they're not simply hoaxes, and that they're not made up. Tonya, walk us through the main schools of thought on this topic.
Okay, so I'm ready for this. The first and most scientifically mainstream within cryptozoology is the relicted hominid theory. The idea that these creatures are surviving undiscovered great ape or early hominid. The Gigantopithecus, I don't know how to pronounce that, gets floated a lot as we discussed, but also Homo Heidelbergensis, Homo erectus are possibly an entirely unknown branch of the genus Homo that managed to persist into the modern era, our time.
This is the one I find most grounded, honestly. We know giant apes existed. We know hominids spread across enormous ranges. Asking whether one isolated branch survived, right? Asking whether one of the isolated branches somehow survived is not a crazy question. It is a serious one.
The challenge is that the Homo erectus and related species used tools, made fire, lived in social groups, left extensive archaeological records. A surviving population would presumably continue with these behaviors at some level. We'd be expected to find something. So have we found something? Because as far as I know, we haven't.
No, but, unless they, regress technologically under prolonged isolation pressure, it happens. The Sentinelese on North Sentinel Islands have lived in a near complete isolation for possibly 60,000 years and have a material culture radically different from mainstream human civilization. Isolation changes things and changes the behavior of said species.
The second theory.
The interdimensional or paranormal hypothesis, which I can already see Kai's eyes glazing over at.
They are. Yes, they definitely are.
But which has serious researchers behind it, including John Keel, Jacques Vallée. The argument is that these creatures don't follow the rules of the physical biology. They appear and vanish without leaving consistent trace evidence. These sightings frequently coincide with anomalous phenomena such as UAP sightings, unidentified aerial phenomenon, poltergeist activity. The theory is they may not be flesh and blood animals from our physical dimension.
Keel and Valley are legitimate researchers, but the interdimensional hypothesis is unfalsifiable by definition. If an entity can appear and disappear at will from another dimension, there is no observation we could make that would disprove its existence. Unfalsifiable claims are scientifically problematic.
Although dark matter is also not directly observable, and certain quantum phenomenon only makes sense if you accept the existence of things we currently cannot detect or measure. The idea that our understanding of physics is complete seems optimistic.
Dark matter generates testable predictions about observable gravitational effects. Interdimensional Bigfoot doesn't currently generate testable predictions. Or predilections. No, I was right. Predictions. Sorry, I was trying to remember if that was the word I was looking for.
Yet.
I genuinely cannot argue with yet.
The third theory.
Third is the straightforward skeptical explanation, misidentification, and hoax. Known animals in unusual circumstances, exaggerated stories, outright fabrications. Kai's home territory.
And I want to be nuanced. Most reports are probably good faith misidentification, not deliberate hoaxes, right? People generally encounter something frightening in poor conditions and their brains fill in the blanks using available cultural templates. The actual deliberate hoaxers are a small percentage, but they've been enormously damaging to serious investigation because they make the whole field look ridiculous to mainstream science.
Fourth, the psychological hypothesis, less discussed but worth serious airtime. The argument associated with Carl Jung, among others, is that these experiences are real and genuinely strange, but they're being generated by human consciousness rather than by a physical creature. The wild man archetype, the large-haired creature at the edge of civilization, appears in virtually every human culture throughout history. The theory says that we may be encountering something real about human consciousness rather than something real about the physical world.
That is both beautiful and deeply unsettling.
Right? It doesn't require a physical creature, but it doesn't also dismiss the experience. It says something real happening to you, just possibly not what you think.
The Jungian I don't know if we're pronouncing Carl Jung's name right. Might be Carl Jung or something. I don't know. Anyways, the Jungian framework is a valuable cultural analysis tool as an explanation for physical evidence, footprints, thrown rocks, hair symbols, but it has some significant gaps as well. You know?
Here's where I ultimately land. I don't think these theories are mutually exclusive. Some reports are misidentification, some are hoaxes, some are known animals' unusual circumstances, and there are a remainder category of reports that don't fit any of these boxes. And that reminder is what keeps me up at night in the very best possible way.
You don't have to believe every sighting to believe that something real is generating at least some of them. This is a reasonable position.
And I'll say this, the fact that serious researchers, wildlife biologists, anthropologists keep returning to this question, keep finding it worth investigating, that tells you something. These aren't stupid questions. They are generally hard questions.
Kai Lacrosse, a closet believer.
I will leave this podcast. I will walk out.
You won't.
You're right. I won't. I won't walk out.
Okay, so we're going to go over to a few questions that people might have when listening to this podcast. Do you think that the Hawley hymn, do you think the Hawley hymn is just Bigfoot or something distinct? Tonya?
Cryptozoological research, Bigfoot functions as a kind of umbrella term for large bipedal hominids reported in North America. The Hawley hymn fits that profile perfectly. Size, description, behavior, smell. I think it's almost certainly the same type of creature. Perhaps a regional population, like how we might have a known subspecies of known animals, you could have regional variations within the broader species of Bigfoot.
So again, if such a creature existed, regional variation would make complete biological sense. Different environments, food sources, climate conditions create selection pressure. That reasoning is sound on its face, but there's a big F.
What I love about the Hawley hymn as a name that is completely local. Whoever named it wasn't thinking about connecting it to the Pacific Northwest. They were describing what they encountered in their own backyard in their own words. That independence is actually meaningful. Now, another question somebody might have is, what would it take Kai, what would it take you, Kai, to convince you that the Bigfoot is real?
Honestly, a confirmed body or a live capture, which I would strongly prefer for the animal's sake. Unambiguous genetic material from a previously unknown primate species confirmed by independent laboratories, clear high-definition footage, not taken with a potato, but taken simultaneously by a multiple independent witnesses with no opportunity for coordination. I'm not asking for the impossible. I'm asking for what we would require to confirm any known large species. The bar for an extraordinary claim should be extraordinary evidence.
And what would it take you to convince you that it doesn't exist?
That's the harder question. You generally cannot prove a negative. The most honest answer is the current evidence situation. Sustained indefinitely would gradually lower the probability in my assessment, but I cannot rule out entirely without an exhaustive systematic survey of every claimed habitat, which has never been done.
That is a really fair answer, and I respect that. So, a next question that somebody listening to this podcast might have, which is, if Bigfoot was real, why haven't we ever found a body? The body question. The classic, right? Tonya.
A few responses. First, we almost never find large animal bodies in their natural habitat. When did you last stumble upon a dead bear in the woods? Animals that die in the wild are consumed by scavengers and decompose rapidly. Second, some researchers propose that if these creatures are highly intelligent, they may engage in deliberate concealment of remains, which is documented behavior in elephants and some great apes. Third, the primary reported habitats are dense old-growth forest and remote mountain terrain, which are generally among the hardest environments to search systematically.
All valid points, although we do periodically find large animal skeletal remains in the wild. The complete absence of skeletal material from what would presumably be a substantial breeding population across centuries of active searching is notable. And the idea they conceal their dead, while interesting, is speculative. It's possible explanation, not an evidenced one.
All valid points, all valid points. I want to add one more possibility. What if physical evidence has been found and there's been active suppression? I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just noting that there are documented cases of biological samples going missing from research sites, of reports being dismissed without investigation. The history of science is not without examples of anomalous findings being buried.
In all honesty, realize institutions cover stuff up. I'm into conspiracy theories. That's exactly why this podcast exists, of bizarre ones. But I'm not going down the institutional cover-up road today, Ash.
I'm not saying cover up. I'm saying evidence goes missing in a lot of fields for a lot of reason. That is just true.
Smithsonian has been credibly accused of suppressing anomalous skeletal finds on multiple documented occasions. The established scientific community does not always handle unexpected evidence well. That is not conspiracy thinking, that is history.
All right, that is also fair.
The last question that our listeners might have when listening to this podcast. For someone brand new to cryptid research, what would be the one thing you'd most want them to know? This last one, this is a nice way to end the Q&A on, but like I said, for someone brand new to all of this, what's the one thing you want them to walk away knowing?
That the people who report these experiences are not stupid. They are not all attention seekers. Many of them are hunters, farmers, wilderness guides, people with extensive outdoor experience who know what a bear fucking looks like, who knows the sounds of the forest at night, and who encountered something they had no framework for. Take them seriously.
That skepticism and curiosity are not opposites. You can be deeply curious about these questions and still demand rigorous evidence. Demanding evidence isn't disrespect. It's how we eventually find answers.
And for me, stay humble. The universe is bigger, stranger, and more surprising than any framework we've built to explain it. We are still finding new species. We are still revising our understanding of human prehistory. We are still learning. Keep that wonder alive. Don't let anyone tell you the map is finished. Okay. We're coming up at the end of the episode. And I told myself I was not going to cry. I need both of you to hold it together too.
No promises.
I'll be fine.
Kai, you will not be fine.
I said what I said.
So, before the official outro, I want to say a few things. When I started the bizarre ones, I didn't start it. Kai and Ms. Anarchy and Tonya started, but when I joined, I genuinely didn't know what it would become. I just knew I had this deep, stubborn curiosity about the things that don't fit neatly into the boxes we've been handed. The weird stuff, the unexplained stuff, the things that make you feel small in the best possible way. And this show became a home for that curiosity. And more than that, it became a community. Y'all, the listeners, the people who said ask questions in the comment section and share episodes and argue with, us in the comments and come out, to listen to it. You made this something I'm genuinely proud of. I'm moving to Ontario to be with the love of my life. That is beautiful, and I'm not sad about that part at all, but leaving Texas, leaving this team, leaving y'all, that is hard. And I wanted my last episode to be this one specifically, because this Hawley hymn is Texas. It's stubborn and weird, and refuses to be explained, and shows up in places that has no business being. Kind of like this show. Kind of like me, honestly.
I'm crying. I told everybody I would cry. I'm crying.
I'm not crying. There's something in my eye.
Kai?
Eyes. Both eyes have something in them. Simultaneously. Is that the word? Yeah. It's a coincidence.
Ash, you built something genuinely real here, and whatever form this show takes going forward, it carries everything you poured into it. You don't get to go off to Canada and take that with you. That stays here with us, with them. That's yours and ours and theirs at once.
Okay, I absolutely lied about not crying. Forget everything I said.
Ash, for the record, and I want this on tape, doing this with you has made me think harder, argue better, question my own certainty in ways I did not expect and genuinely value. You've made me a better thinker and a more honest one. That is not nothing. That is actually a lot.
Kai Lacrosse, you just said something gently kind to me on this podcast. Someone please clip that and send it to me so I can watch it when I miss y'all.
I will categorically deny if asked, even under waterboarding.
The tape does not lie, Kai.
Okay. Let me get it together to the listeners. Thank you. Really and truly. Whether you found us last week or you've been here since the very beginning, thank you for sitting with the strange stuff alongside us. Thank you for staying curious. Thank you for not needing everything to be neat and explained and solved. The world is weirder and more wonderful than we've been told. And I genuinely believe that is worth celebrating. Don't stop looking. Don't stop asking questions that make other people uncomfortable. And the next time you're somewhere dark and quiet and the hair on the back of your neck stands up, maybe trust that.
From Hawley to the Himalayas.
And everywhere in between.
This has been The Bizarre Ones. I'm Diamond Ash, and it has been the genuine honor of my life. Stay curious, stay weird, and I will see you on the other side. Good night, and stay bizarre.